I believe the Greek term for sin is harmontano, and that means you're missing the mark,
Mm.
and anybody that, is involved with archery, like if you go out and like, my goal is to make everybody successful. So I love to see everybody hit the center of that target.
Yeah.
So if I'm working with somebody, I'm, my thing is like, once I work with them and I get them paper tuned and I get their bow all fitted to them, and, comfort equals accuracy. That's just one of my mainstays. I've got to make the shooter comfortable. If he's brand new, my whole goal is, he needs to be ultimate comfort zone, peep height, draw length, the kind of release, whether index or a handheld, whatever it is to make that shooter the most comfortable. And then, we go out, and my thing is no matter where the arrow hits for the first time, because we just set the bow up, within 3 arrows, I'm going to try to have you in the X, and with coaching and, anybody that goes out, when you see somebody shoot and they just terribly miss a target, it really bothers me. And it bothers me in my heart, because it's like, man, we got to get this guy dialed in. That's the whole thing. I mean, you want everybody to be successful. I mean, even watching hunting videos, I mean, I don't know how many hunting videos you watch and you see that arrow strike where the last place that bow hunter wanted to hit that animal and he hit it there, and you're just like, no,
Yeah.
it's just like, and it's just like a knife in your own heart.
Robin Hood and Little John are walking through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the other one has to say.
Hey guys, welcome back to the RuckList podcast. We've got a friend of mine, Wayne Endicott, on. I think a lot of people know who you are, Wayne, because of the bow rack and you just being a legend in that community. Tyrel said it already. He's like, the bow rack was sort of the first archery shop you'd ever.
I heard about the bow rack before I'd ever set foot in a archery shop,
Yeah.
here in Colorado. So
Yeah. And so it's funny because I had to wear my hat you gave me today. This is one of my go-to favorites, but
Oh
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
I was hiking with my son on a trail close to here, and a guy was walking past and he stopped me. He goes, "Dude, cool hat, man." You know what I mean? I was like, "Wayne's my boy."
Right.
And it was funny because my son made a comment. He goes, "Man, Dad, all your guys are kind of the same, you know?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "They're all kind of out here on a trail. They're pretty, they're fit." And he didn't say it to that well, but what he really meant was like all of my buddies are out hiking and staying, you know what I mean? Staying kind of
Right. Right.
savages. But Wayne, thank you for coming on. We got to meet in New Mexico on a hunt. Did not know that you were going to get to be in camp, or I was going to get to be in camp with you and Lisa and your son Nate, right? Was it that's his name?
Yeah, Nate came along later. I mean, we were there for several days, and then Nate caught up with us. Of course, he was finishing up a hunt, and then came down and filmed my wife's hunt.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
I mean, introduce. I mean, everybody. I mean, I know you don't act like you're famous, Wayne, but you are to us. But introduce yourself as you would, man. I mean, I know what I know.
Oh,
Um,
just a kid, growing up. I grew up on a farm, a corporate farm, and we had two row crop farms here in Oregon, and we raised bush beans, carrots, beets. Um, we rotated with wheat. So, I have an agriculture background. And so farming communities, I'm real familiar with. I know everything goes on there. Um, it's probably a good thing I didn't continue on in farming. I was the kid that, my dad, of course, raised me hunting and fishing, and he was dedicated to working. But when we hunt and fish, we took it serious, and that background, is what kind of planted me. I mean, there was like in Eugene, there was one old time. I mean, I'm going to date myself. This is back in the '60s when I was a kid. There was one sporting goods store, and she would stop at that sporting goods store, and I would lose her in that store because I didn't want her to say, "Son, can we leave now?" I
yeah,
just beg her to stop, and I'd just get lost in there. And they had everything, and I was just like, "Oh, I'm just at home in this place," So subsequently, sometimes your childhood dreams is probably what you should pursue, and so that's what, I wound up with an archery store.
yeah,
And the bow rack was existing. It was started by Ron Schreiber in 1973, and of course I didn't grow up bow hunting. My dad was not a bow hunter, but the kids I graduated high school were, and they got me into bow hunting. And so I went obviously to the bow rack and bought my first bow, and that would probably been about, probably that was 1979 or 80, and I bought my first bow. And And then I wound up working with those guys. So of course we wound up at a sawmill, some years after high school working together, and all we could talk about was bow hunting. So of course,
Yeah.
then I started bow hunting, and then in later years actually went to college, and we hung out at the bow rack all the time. And when I finished up college, the store actually came up for sale, and I was first in line, and there wasn't much to buy. I think I had 8 bows on the rack, a little bit of equipment and a name and a leased
Yeah.
building. And that's what I had.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of was my start. But, just time in the industry, I think this year makes 39 years in the archery industry. So it's been a minute.
Wow.
And not all those years were spent in the archery store, 5 kids. In the 90s, archery wasn't that popular, especially in the early 90s. And, we had a good store, but, it didn't really, support 5 kids. And so, I swung a hammer, I did concrete, I worked in the trades,
Yeah.
construction trades, and I did that a lot.
Yeah.
Every winter for 5 winters, probably. And then, of course, my wife and I built a couple houses. And this house I'm in right now, we just tore it down started last June, and we just completed last week. And
Yeah.
I had a lot of good help, a lot of good friends that are in the trades and stuff, but it was still mostly on my shoulders, to complete the house. So, it was a good project. And so, like I said, lots of good friends that helped me. Steve Johnson's like my number one guy. I used to work for him, Raymond, and he came back and helped me remodel my archery store 2 years ago. We added 3,000 square feet, and then he helped me with this with this house, and a lot of other good friends that came along and helped it on the way. So
Yeah.
a lot of good friends in the trade. So that aside, the archery shop, I'm actually, besides this podcast, I'm back to work at the archery store. So
Yeah.
kind of have a little bit of probably the longest sabbatical I've had,
Yeah.
since last June. So
Yeah.
it's been good.
Yeah. Was Lisa still in the shop, or was she helping you with the
Yeah, oh
house?
yeah. She's the mainstay, and
Yeah.
like the hat you're wearing. I mean, all the swag. I would have never did that. I mean, for years and years and years, we had one hat, and we would give it away with with a bow purchase. And I don't know how many hat styles she has now. I've lost track.
Yeah. Yeah. Handful.
Sweatshirts,
Yeah.
hats, and T-shirts. I mean, and it's all hers. I mean, I would have never gone there, but she started it years ago, and she's just built on it ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's fun. It's really fun, Wayne. I could dig in for an hour and a half just on the story, and just the idea of, people see it now and they just go, look at just how, kind of romanticizing the bow shop and where you're at. But we don't all get to see those winters of you swinging a hammer or framing or laying tile or whatever it was that you were doing. And that grind is missed a
Yeah.
lot of times. When we see it now, what we see is the result of a
So
lot of winters,
I've got a short story on that. So every year, we'd be struggling in the archery industry. It was just struggling times back then. And, so we would always run on a line of credit, being a seasonal business, now we're pretty steady throughout the year. We have, good business, that keeps my guys busy. I've got, 5 techs that work for me, and my daughter and my wife and I. And, so we stay pretty busy. But, in those shy years, we'd have to survive on a line of credit. So, we'd get through our busy season, pay our bills, and, take out a line of credit, for the next year. And I remember all the bankers were good friends of mine. Of course, they bow hunted and stuff, but I went in to sign on this line of credit one time, and it was a new banker, and it was one of my good friends, one of his assistants, and he obviously had no interest in archery or bow hunting or anything. And I walk in, and he kind of shoves the manila envelope over, and he goes, just sign where it's got to sign. And he's got his feet up on the desk, and he's kind of looking at his cowboy boots, and he's just like, and I open it, and there's a sticky note on top, and it says Terry, which my buddy was Terry. He was the president of the bank. And it says Terry. It says the business barely breaks even every year. They're borrowing money again for a line of credit to survive in another year. What is the point? And I read that note, and I'm like, I pulled off the sticky note, and I go, was I supposed to see this?
Right.
And he looks at me, and he's like, he's all in shock, and he grabs it, and it's like, no, He goes, just sign on the lines. But, it was good because, I mean, it kind of woke me up and I'm like, either I have a passion for this because, my wife and I would ask ourselves, why are we doing this? And so there was several years in a row that I worked outside of the shop. And one time that same banker, Terry Gent, he was an awesome dude. It was back in the days when you worked on a handshake. And I went down to Terry and I said, Terry, hey, there's a piece of property that came up for sale just down the street from where our location is now. And I go, I want to go down there and I want to build a building so I can get out from underneath this giant lease every month. I want to build a building that's just catered for archery shop, not an industrial building that I'm changing into an archery shop. I want to cater this building, just particularly for archery. And he reaches in his drawer and the guy, he was such a prince of a man. And I mean, he believed in us. He opens up his drawer and he pulls out a set of blank checks and he throws them across the table and he goes, go buy it. I'll open you up on a line of credit. He goes, we'll do the whole building and we'll roll you over into a small business loan at the end of it. And you'll be down the road. And that was in 1999. And so, it was just awesome. And so when we broke ground, I was 71 days from the day we broke ground to the day I was standing at the door watching my city inspectors walk around and they were counting all my bushes in my landscaping and checking all my lines and just dotting all the T's. And I've got an empty shop and we were down the street about 2.5 blocks in an industrial building and we're all boxed up, all ready to move, and bam, they gave me my final and we moved in. It was awesome.
71 days is flying, man. That's crazy.
I was a lot younger.
Yeah. I've done
and that year we were poor as church mice too. I mean, I did my own wiring, I did my own HVAC. I mean, a buddy and I did the concrete. The only thing I didn't do, I even painted it. I didn't do the sheetrock. I'm not a sheetrocker. I'm just not. And so I did not do the sheetrock, and I didn't roof it, but everything else was my baby.
Yeah. That's flying. So you were doing 14, 16-hour days and just.
Oh, yeah. And what was cool about it is my dad was in his 80s at the time. My dad was born in 1917, and he went through the Depression, old farmer, so he'd sold the farms and he was down there every day. He'd bring me lunch every day and what do you need? And I'd try to run him off, because, dad was getting up there in years. He's like, leave me alone. I'm having fun, but he was there with me every day. And it was one of those winters I think I started at the end of November on that construction project and I was in rain clothes pretty much till I dried in. So like 40, 41 days of that construction was just pouring down rain because of course it can rain in Oregon,
Yeah.
So, but it was a good project. And so that's a little history.
Are you near Eugene still then, or where are you at there?
So we're in Springfield.
Yeah.
I-5, the I-5 corridor, goes all the way from Mexico to the Canadian border. We're just a mile and a half off of I-5 on a freeway, a 105 freeway, which is, one of the freeways that goes, either to the coast, Highway 126, it goes to the coast, or it goes to Bend or Eastern Oregon. We're just off of that 4-lane freeway on a side street, so you can see us kind of from the freeway there. So, we're a real convenient location. So it was a great location.
Do you have guys just touristing, like coming to see the shop and?
Oh yeah. And I've got to give Cam Haynes the credit for that, because, of course, Cam and I have been friends since we were kids, and Roy Roth and Cam and I mean, we hunted when we were kids. I mean, Cam's way above my accomplished level on everything. That's how I met Kip Falk, when we hunted together in New Mexico,
Right.
Kip came by the shop one time and, I'm not the sharpest guy on, who everybody is, but I remember seeing Kip on hunting videos, right? And I'd heard the story on Under Armour with him and his brother, so I knew who Kip was, but, he stopped by the shop and this has been years ago. And he goes, man, your weather's just like our weather. I go, well, where are you from? And he goes, Maine. And I'm like, oh yeah. We probably have pretty similar weather. I go, what are you doing out here? He goes, oh, I just came out to hang out with Cam Haynes. He goes, I'm Kip Falk. And yeah, I got you. How you doing? I know who you are. And so Kip hung out with us there for a couple of days, but Cam's, progression, in bow hunting and his accomplishments and everything, he just brought us along with him, so to speak. And, the Lift Run Shoot podcast has been giant for us, and we've met a lot of great people, that Cam's brought through his podcast. And I've had the opportunity to set a lot of them up with bows
Yeah.
and share archery with them, which, it's kind of been my job for a lot of years. And
Yeah.
I still love every minute of that. I mean, whether it could just be, a little kid coming in for the first time, or, somebody that, is just thinking about getting into bow hunting, or Jay, or Aaron Rodgers, or Jelly Roll, Jason,
Yeah.
it's been a great opportunity for everybody. So,
Yeah.
and real rewarding for me,
Right.
so I still love every minute that I'm in that shop that I can share archery.
Yeah. It's funny because I've told the story a lot, Wayne, about how we were in hunt camp and we had just met. We hadn't even gone on a hunt yet. And my bow was shooting a little funny. And next thing I
Right.
know, we're sitting in hunt camp and Wayne's got like a Coors beer box unwrapped and taped up between two like picnic tables. And he's paper tuning my bow in the middle of hunt camp. And I just handed it over to him. I'm like, I'll just step back and just watch and see what happens here. Cause he just took over and just you went crazy on it, which was really cool. And we didn't even know each other. And you just kind of
Right.
over and tuned me up right there in camp. And so definitely see your energy. You got excited to grab a hold of a bow and make it shoot straight. And so I didn't
Yeah. Well, what's
part on that hunt, but you did your job, and I'm sure the arrows would have done their job as well, but I didn't get it
right.
done.
Well, what's crazy is, the word sin is I believe the Greek term for sin is harmontano, and that means you're missing the mark, and
Mm,
anybody that, is involved with archery, like if you go out and like, my goal is to make everybody successful. So I love to see everybody hit the center of that target.
yeah,
So if I'm working with somebody, I'm, my thing is like, once I work with them and I get them paper tuned and I get their bow all fitted to them, and, comfort equals accuracy. That's just one of my mainstays. I've got to make the shooter comfortable. If he's brand new, my whole goal is, he needs to be ultimate comfort zone, peep height, draw length, the kind of release, whether index or a handheld, whatever it is to make that shooter the most comfortable. And then, we go out, and my thing is no matter where the arrow hits for the first time, because we just set the bow up, within 3 arrows, I'm going to try to have you in the X, and with coaching and, anybody that goes out, when you see somebody shoot and they just terribly miss a target, it really bothers me. And it bothers me in my heart, because it's like, man, we got to get this guy dialed in. That's the whole thing. I mean, you want everybody to be successful. I mean, even watching hunting videos, I mean, I don't know how many hunting videos you watch and you see that arrow strike where the last place that bow hunter wanted to hit that animal and he hit it there, and you're just like, no,
yeah,
it's just like, and it's just like a knife in your own heart. Well, it's the same way with, with targets. It's like when you take that archer out for the first time, I mean, you want them to hit that target. I mean, that makes you feel good. It's like everything is good. So you're reducing the amount of error and mistake in their whole shooting style. And, that whole process is just kind of what drives me, because when I was a kid and I first started in archery, it was garbage equipment. I mean, like we had horrible arrow flight. I mean, there wasn't even such a thing as a TM Hunter launcher style rest when I started. I mean, we had like they were called a Huntmaster 2000. They were never made for releases. They had a plunger button and a foot. And then of course, I came up through the overdraw eras, and there wasn't that many selections on arrows. You had a 2114, and I mean the 2213. Easton shafts weren't even developed yet. I mean, we had just limited amount of shafts, and they were all under spine, and we were shooting too much poundage, and the bows were poorly tuned. So I went through that whole era of really, really poor arrow flight. So when you showed up in camp, anytime somebody says that their arrows aren't flying right, I mean, it just clicks with me. And and I wouldn't have been able to foresee what I needed, but I needed the spacers for your bow
yeah,
because we needed to space it over. and change the shift of the cams so they were rolling over a little bit different because we were getting, or I believe if I remember right, we were getting a hard left tear,
You're getting
or
it.
no, I was a hard right tear,
Yeah.
I think,
So out of the
and
bow.
we needed to,
Yeah.
out of the bow, and you were doing everything right as far as your form and everything looked good. We just needed to, center shot the bow and then, what we call top hat tuning or
Yeah.
changing the position, static position of the cam so we could get, the correct rollover when that bow fires. I tell everybody it's like a rope. You take a heavy rope and you whip it. You can whip it to the right, it'll roll all the way to the right. You whip it to the left, it'll roll all the way to the left. So,
Mhm.
on a split limb bow, you're changing the tilt of those cams to where when that string fires, it's casting that arrow straight, and the string doesn't have a direction to the right or the left. That's with it rests perfectly centered. And so all the bows today that are made on the market, have that tuning system. Either Hoyt's come up with a new system where they're built into the limbs where you can fine tune it. Matthews has got a moving system to where it shifts the limb. Bowtech's got a cam shift system. Everybody's, that's on the market, today has a shifting system with the limbs so you can center the bow. But that's what we needed to do with yours. And I didn't have my portable bow press and I didn't have, Hoyt spacers. So we did our
He
best.
said one
But I
word.
think we got it a little better because it
Right.
was ripping terrible and we got it down to a minimal rip.
It was.
So that's a long story on the way around to how I feel when somebody says I have poor
Yeah.
arrow flight.
Yep. Yep. And that was a long, I mean, I had been on a 6-day hunt and then I drove straight to camp with you. I drove straight from
Right.
that camp to another hunt. And then from that, I did 4 different archery bull hunts in that season. And I was home for about 3 days and 30 days, which was an absolute dream. And I stayed married, which was the real accomplishment of all of that. So
Yeah.
it
So
was,
my wife, she, Kip had gotten her a tag, for that unit. And the campground that we were staying in there, I think the most punishing part for you in that hunt was all the bulls in the campground every night,
it was,
bugling right next to our tents.
oh,
And you, like, if I remember right, you couldn't resist to not go chase those bulls, right?
I hunted that all wrong. And we can talk about it. I hunted that all
Because
wrong.
I told you, I said, Brian, just give up on the elk. These elk have already had one early season.
Yeah.
And I go, just give up on them because like they've got like a very good college education, like, not 101, hunter evasion. Like they're totally graduated on evading bow hunters because they've already been through an early season. And every day they were out of that campground. And I remember you kept circling, trying to get in front of them. And
I ran.
and they're just good track stars and they're good at getting away from you.
They're so fast.
And it's all
We put so many, because that's kind of how we hunt in Colorado is, we'll get, we'll kind of call and get some vocalization out of them, and then we'll bust over a ridge or two, you know what I mean, and kind of catch up
right.
and play them. But our techniques did not work in New Mexico. And Cam had told me, he says, "Go sit here, just go sit right here." They funnel down through. A bull will come around eventually, and I think everybody that ran his program shot a bull.
Right. Well, yeah, and I'll be honest with you, it was a tough hunt, because my wife, she was wanting to kill a good bull, and I called in little bull after little bull. It got to the point to where my wife and my son are going, Dad, don't call. All you're calling in is these little tiny bulls. Well, we had hard time finding age class, and there was herd bulls that were 5 points. And my wife wound up killing a really old, giant-bodied regress bull that had like no molars, and it sounded like the biggest bull in the woods, and it was a good 5 point. In fact, it's on, if anybody ever wants to watch it, it's my son's Endicott films, and
Yeah.
and it's he did a good job of chronicling her. He does a fantastic job with the camera, and got her kill shot and everything. But she shot that bull at 55 yards and nearly passed through with a Grim Reaper broadhead, which was impressive. Bull only went like maybe 80 yards and died. And then right in the beginning of his video, so we're butchering that bull. We just took pictures, and there was a bigger bull that we saw in the morning that was with that group of elk, and it was bugling right there. Well, then it started getting really close. Well, pretty soon it's right there, and my son got footage of it, and it was probably one of the best bulls we saw. It was probably a 360 bull, but there was, I don't know if it was just a particular year or they're, just issuing too many tags for that unit, but I don't know. Did you see anything that in that unit on your hunt that was big? Because I mean, we were having trouble finding bulls that were, would anything but just raghorn 5 points.
Yeah. The one day I did, we went up where we all parked at the same trailhead and you guys kind of went left and went uphill and we stayed down low. Um,
Hmm.
Later on that afternoon, we were just eating lunch and we heard a small cow call and it was really, really close. And so I made a sneak in, saw like 3 or 4 heads poke up, and then I saw a bull pick his head up. Um, and that bull, he was a 5x5, but like a massive 5x5 bull. He probably
Oh,
wasn't,
gotcha.
I think he was, if he was 300, that was about it. So he wasn't,
Hmm.
what you in that New Mexico unit for what you pay for that tag.
Right.
And I missed that bull. He was at 60 yards. And like the second I pulled the trigger on my arrow, he took a big step forward. And it's
Mm.
funny, when he was quartering away, a big step forward is plenty of room, and the arrow went right behind his ass cheeks and stuck into a branch.
Yeah.
And that was the only, I had 2 other opportunities on smallish bulls, that I didn't get an arrow off on. But it was, yeah, we chased and chased and chased and chased. I mean, I wore out a pair of boots on that hunt. I mean, it was
Yeah.
crazy. It was that hunt, I tore my ankle. I tore the 2 tendons that go around my ankle bone on that hunt, hunting with
Right.
Cam, trying to keep up with him like a spider monkey in the running this whole riverbed. Yeah, Kip, yeah, Kip, and blew out my ankle. He's still teasing me. He's like, "You're limping." I'm like, "Dude, it's torn. Like they're gone. These tendons are gone." But Kip's a tough son of a gun. So
Oh, yeah.
it was a good, and I'll tell you what, man, the dynamic of you and Lisa in the camp. I told Tyrel, I was like, we should have had Wayne and Lisa on the podcast just to listen to her give you hell the whole time because
Oh, yeah.
she
Oh,
does not
she's good
let
at
up.
that.
Oh
No,
yeah.
she's good at that. No, and we banter a lot. I actually get a kick out of her. I mean, she's like hunting with a job foreman. I mean, when we were kids, I mean, we hadn't probably been married 3 or 4 years, and we were over in Eastern Oregon in a pretty common unit, and it was in a big burn, and there was lots of elk numbers. Well, I got like 3 herd bulls, good herd bulls, and they got like 40 cows, and then there's some satellite bulls. And there's nothing between us and them but burnt poles. And I'm at about 120 130 yards away. I'm just standing there, and it's in the morning, and I've got this decoy, and I'm a big decoy guy. I get this decoy, and it's an old one, and this guy made it, and it had a body, and it had a head and ears, of a cow
Mhm.
elk. And I've got more sophisticated ones now, but this is like old school decoy.
We have
And
to
I've
ask
got
about
wrapped
your
up
hats
on.
eventually, Wayne. Don't let me
I,
forget. We want to talk about your hats.
Oh, my hats. Yeah, yeah. You gotta be secure with your manhood to wear those, by the way. Not every dude can wear those. I mean, if they're
I'll wear
sensitive
about
about
anything
what they
occasion.
look like, they can't wear those. But
So,
anyway,
yeah.
so we're standing there, and I hadn't probably been standing there, and I'm watching, they're moving a direction, I'm trying to figure out, I'm looking at the wind, sun's coming up, I'm trying to figure out wind direction, everything. And my wife, she steps around, she goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to figure this out." She goes, "Well, they're right there. Get the decoy off your pack and let's just go right at them." And this is always my, like, I listen to her like you should never listen to her. I listen to her and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, well, we give that a shot, and it was against my better judgment. Because I mean, if I would have just been patient and ran my game, it would have been. So I take this decoy off, and we're weaving from tree to tree to tree, and every once in a while, we're getting within like 50, 60 yards, but the bulls are on the other side of the herd, and the cows would pick up and they'd look at me with that decoy, and then they'd go back to feeding and moving and looking it around, and so they weren't really spooking from it. And there's a couple down trees, big root wad there. And I come right around the root wad, and there's a spike bull, and I don't see him, and
Yeah.
he's right there. And so I walk past him, not looking to my left, and because I've got all the herd in front of me, and all of a sudden he just goes ripping right past us, blows the whole herd out. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I knew better. I knew better, because if I just would have been patient, we would have killed one of those bulls. I had everything in my favor, and I had a game plan, but I thought, well, we'll give her. And so she's always, she's always like hunting with a job for him, and she's gonna like, what are you doing? Let's do this. Like
Yeah.
it's always against my better judgment, but and it's cost her a few times too when she's made her own decisions on things too. But we have a lot of fun hunting together, and a lot of years she'll hunt more than I do. I mean,
Yeah.
when our kids got old enough to where, she wasn't at home and the kids were in school and I could take care of them, we'd send her off on all kinds of different hunts, bear hunts, antelope hunts. I have a ton of antelope points in several states, but, the archery shop's like an infant in August. I mean, August
Yeah.
is our month, and, most all the, antelope hunts, archery antelope hunts come off in August, and I can't go. I mean, it's just, my guys, we just, no way. It's all hands on deck that time of year. And, I wouldn't do that to them. So I just point saber every year on
Backing
antelope,
them up.
but
Yeah.
we get rid of her. We send
So,
her on a lot of hunts. So
that's so
yeah,
much fun.
Yeah. Antelope. Tyrell's a big ant. He loves chasing antelope around.
Yeah, we're
yeah.
pretty new. Yeah, we got like 5 years under our
Yeah.
belt,
Yep.
and it's so much fun. It is
What
so hot.
states are you hunting?
Colorado.
Colorado.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like southeast.
Can you hunt every year with archery in Colorado for antelope?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
you
an
can?
over-the-counter tag.
Wow.
And then where we goes, east of I-25. So basically east of I-25 corridor is open to this over-the-counter.
Mhm.
But most of it's private. So
Oh,
if
gotcha.
you got somewhere to go, there's a couple public places around there, and then I
Mhm.
think like the good units like around here, kind of more in the northwest, north. It's like 2-3 points, I think,
Yeah. It's not too bad.
Gotcha.
to
Mhm.
Yeah.
to get a
Oregon's better archery antelope hunts, I think, are taken, north of 10 or 11, maybe even 12 points now. There's several units that are really good, for archery. One of our most, renowned units, my wife she's hunted it once and she thought it was better than Wyoming because she's hunted Wyoming. She used to hunt with Nate Simmons and Guy Eastman, and Cam, they'd all go to Wyoming, and, she'd hunted, antelope back there in Wyoming. And she thought that particular unit, when she drew it, she thought it was better than Wyoming. And there's, a lot of Oregon's antelope archery hunts. They have a rifle hunt first and then the archery guys get to come after. This particular unit, it's the first hunt. So the archery guys are in there in the very first hunt.
You're not figured
And
out.
of course, it takes quite a few points to draw it, but I'm way overpointed for it now. I've got 1,000,000 points. I could draw it at any time. So
Just gotta
all
find the
good
time
there.
now. In August.
Got to find a moment to go in that time of year, which is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, the over the counter for us is pretty sweet because it starts mid-August and then it runs through basically through elk season, but you got buck only before September. And we don't have a big spot, but we got a good little, a chunk of private that we get to run around on, and it's just so many reps you can get, before just chasing things.
You
and
can mess it
whatnot.
up and
Yeah.
go to the
Like
next
a good
chunk
year
of ground.
starter. It's a good like first of the year. Just go down there and have fun. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd love to go sometime, but it just, like I say, for me right now, my August is pretty much tattooed, on my heart every year that I'm going to be in that archery store
Yep.
every day. So yeah,
How long have you and
it's
Lisa been
tough.
married, Wayne? Because you guys have been your business partner.
31 years this year. We just had an anniversary, but we postponed it because the 27th we take off, and it's kind of a fish. Well, I do a little bit of fishing, but mostly access deer hunting. But we go to Hawaii every year, and we've got a lot of good friends over there on Maui, and we hunt Molokai, and so we go to both islands, and so we take a couple weeks there, and usually bring home quite a few coolers of meat. So it's a great time. So we're postponing our celebration of our 31st this year
that's
till we
great.
get there.
That's great. What's the secret, man, to us young kids that are
so awesome.
still trying to figure it out?
Still
How do you
trying to
keep
figure it out.
partners and life partners and all that? I mean, that's a big deal. That's a lot.
Well, the number one thing to figure that out is Christ. I mean, if you don't have Christ in your life, I mean, if you haven't surrendered your heart and life to Christ, I mean, that's more than just a partner decision. I mean, that's an eternal decision. So, nobody would know who I am. I mean, I wouldn't have an archery shop. I wouldn't even be alive today if I didn't get blindsided by Christ when I was when I was 18 years old. I didn't even see it coming. I was the worst example of an 18-year-old kid you could possibly imagine, on the road to destruction. I mean, John 10:10 says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. That's the devil. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Jesus said, I come that you may have life and life more abundantly. I mean, I knew not one verse out of the Bible. I'd never been to church. I was just on a road to destruction. And, through a series of events and God's grace in my life, that changed my life. And so that's number one. I mean, there's no hope for a relationship. It's just useless because everybody lives a selfish, self-centered, life, because they're lost. I mean, honestly, you can stumble through life and you can, try to chase all of your own selfish passions. And,
Mhm.
marriage is, it's a partnership, and it's no different than, we're the bride of Christ when you become a Christian, so you
Mhm.
understand the whole covenant of Christianity. So, covenants, in the Old Testament, they would take animals and divide them, and both parties in the covenant would walk through the divided animals. And if one of the parties broke the covenant, it was legal for the other, party to, do to them what they did to the animals. That was cutting a covenant. It was called cutting a covenant. And so, in marriage, we don't treat it like that, in our culture anymore. I mean, marriage is something that's disposable, and you can throw it away.
Yeah.
But, you know, um, I think, I think young guys, if you're not married, or, you don't have a relationship with, and I don't know either one, are you both single?
We're both married.
Married.
Yep.
Yep.
Are you
Yep.
both married? Oh, okay. Gotcha. So yeah, you're in covenant. So
But we're
that's good.
humbly
But I mean,
asking.
I'm a rookie still, I feel,
yeah,
We're,
yeah.
Decade, I
there's
guess.
just always something to learn there. You're 10 years, I'm about 20. Oh, Lord.
Oh boy. Yeah.
I'm
Don't let your wife watch that.
22 years. Yeah, I've been with my
22
wife
years. Yeah, that's
18
good. I
years.
mean, um, probably number one is forgiveness. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't,
Goodness.
there's a lot of times I've been mad at my wife, and there's lots of times she's been mad at me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
but, forgiveness is giant. I mean, you can't let things linger. I remember more so when we were younger, my wife used to get really mad at me or something, and she'd come up and she'd say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Anymore, that doesn't happen as often.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
she might be in the background. But
Yep.
um, you know, for me, I mean, it took me a long time to understand, the full impact of, forgiving others. It's just super important. There was times when I was younger that, you would hang on to a grudge, but I mean, the whole crutch of the gospel is that, you need to forgive. You need to forgive your enemies. You need to forgive those who have sinned against you. Because that's super important. I mean,
Yeah.
anybody that has bitterness in their life, it's just like a grave with both ends kicked out. I mean, you might be walking down the center of it, but you can't see side to side. I mean, there's no view and there's no freedom, and you're stuck in that rut. I mean, you're deep in that rut and you're stuck in it. And if you can't figure out how to forgive, I mean, every portion of anybody that's ever done anything against you, that's wronged you, if you can't figure out how to open up your heart and forgive them. I'm counseling with a fellow right now, and I mean, he's in a tough situation. I mean, he's in a really, really rough, abusive situation. And the first thing I told him is, I like, regardless of what goes on, I mean, have to forgive her. And I know it's tough. I mean, it's really tough. But you have to find in your heart to forgive it. So, with every day to day, with your day to day relationships, I mean, there's going to be tough times. I mean, if there isn't now, that's great. But you're going to, there might be a time that you're going to face all kinds of tough times, and you have to be able to forgive. So I think that's paramount.
Yeah. And I knew your faith was a big, I mean, just because being around you, it kind of oozes out of you, which is beautiful. Dude, tell me about that 18-year-old you, Wayne. I mean, I love,
Oh,
you said if you hadn't found your faith, you'd be dead today.
oh, I
Um,
would.
where were you
Yeah,
at? I
there's
mean, what would you, if you sat down with that 18-year-old today, how would you counsel him? And what do you tell a kid that's in that spot where
Well,
you're,
there was no talking to that kid. So, you know, people are brought into your life, that God speaks through, and God makes a change in your life. I mean, men that try to change themselves, I mean, you can change the outside physical appearance of yourself, but if you're still lost, you're still lost. I mean,
Mm,
there's still going to be an emptiness. And, you know, Pilate, when, when Jesus came before Pilate, I mean, he said the most famous words there was. He took Jesus, before the crowds, and he says, what shall I do with this, with this Jesus? Well, every man has to make that decision, and in Revelations, I believe it's 3:18. Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." I mean, we serve a polite God. I mean, He's knocking at your door of your heart, and He said, "If any man opens that door, I will come in and I'll dine with him and he with me." And so Jesus wants to have a relationship with you, but we're not robots. I mean, He created us with free will choice. I mean, any man can make that choice. And the 18-year-old me was horrible. I mean, I grew up, with good moral parents. I mean, even if I, used any kind of, you know, off color language of any kind, I mean, that wasn't okay in our household. And,
Right.
my parents, but, my dad didn't believe in church. I mean, my granddad was, he helped form Thurston Christian Church, and my granddad was an evangelist. He spoke, he pastored, he never pastored, but he spoke at a lot of different churches. And this would have been in the early 1900s. My granddad passed away in 1966. I was 5 years old, and but everybody loved him. I mean, he was a man of love. And my dad, super moral guy, but he just thought, I can be good, and that's how I'm going to get there. So,
Mm.
my mom just, I punished my poor mom. I mean, but as time moved on, when I grew up, I just became the worst example of a teenage kid you can imagine. I mean, I grew up on a corporate farm. I mean, I learned work ethic. I mean, we worked hard on the farm, but I mean, the various activities, I mean, that was my whole goal in life. I mean, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that was my deal. I mean, I was going to get my own. I mean, all the kids that worked for me, we had a big irrigation crew, and I ran the irrigation crew starting at like the age of 12. And
Yeah.
so, of course, all these kids that are working for me are all teenagers.
Yeah.
And because they had to be able to get there, either mom drop them off or they could drive, or they'd all pile in a car. And, so we had anywhere from 10 to 14 kids moving irrigation pipe on 1,000 acres of row crop farms. And, they were into every kind of activity there was. And of course, I landed some hot rods.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so these kids, they would scalp concert tickets in Portland. So whether it was Fleetwood Mac, Ted Nugent, AC/DC, Van Halen, Kiss, whoever was coming that was a big rock and roll name, Cheap Trick, I mean, you name it, Eddie Money, it didn't matter which old rocker it was, old now. When they came, to Portland, we'd take all our irrigation money, and these kids got me into it at the age of 13 years old. And I went to my mom and I'm like, "Mom, I need my paycheck, from irrigation money. I work on the farm. I need my paycheck early." She's like, "Why? What do you need your paycheck for?" I go, "Well," and I explained to him. I go, "Bill and Richie," I go, they buy all these concert tickets, and then we go to Portland, we stand and we buy them for $7.95, and they sell them for 20, 25, $30 at the door on these sold out concerts. And she goes, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life." I go, "Mom, just give me my paycheck." And, you know, foolishly, she gave me my paycheck. And so that started like the next 4 years of, seeing every concert that came to Portland, the whole scene that went with it. Of course, I never really got off into heavy drugs, but drinking,
This
Yeah.
would have been you in
that
the
we were always part of
Right.
it.
I mean, you would have been what, 72, 73, somewhere in there then?
Yeah, it was in that time frame,
Yeah.
up to 1975. I think Kiss concert came through Portland. Kiss and Cheap Trick opened for Kiss in 1975, and I scalped tickets at that concert.
Did you go to these shows?
That
Did
was
you
big
watch
money.
them?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Did you go watch any of those shows?
Oh yeah, we'd always go in. We'd save one ticket for ourselves, and we'd go
Yeah.
in. And what was great is the one kid's brother. We would all smuggle his camera gear in, because see, they had their own camera guys, and they would do their own. So you remember the old teeny bop, rock magazines? Well,
Uh-huh.
he had an ad in there, and he had his own dark room, and he would blow up all these pictures, and we'd smuggle cameras in, and he was really good at, like, he'd wear a big coat and everything, and he'd have his camera in there. He'd be snapping pictures, old 35 millimeter zoom lens. And so he had all these great pictures. Well, he'd advertise in those teeny bop magazines, and he had a big business where he'd sell, all these 8x10s, or he'd blow them up as big as he could, And
Yeah.
I think 11 by 14 was the biggest he could blow up. And that was his business. So we'd sneak in all his camera gear and we'd be right down front,
Yeah.
and I saw everybody early, but the whole key to that story is, the year that I received Christ when I was 18 years old. I didn't go back. I quit hanging out with those guys, and Richie came out to the farm, and I was helping my dad. I'd actually graduated high school, and I was helping my dad move irrigation pipe one weekend because I'd gotten a job as a welder, and was working up in Springfield. So I went to Corvallis, and Richie came out, and he just walks out on the field, and he goes, "Hey, dude," he goes, "We were at a concert about 3 weeks ago, and we were driving home," and he goes, "I was driving, I was drunk, and I hit one of the abruptments and flipped the car." And Chris O'Donnell, he was one of the kids that was he was a good kid. He was probably the best kid out of all of us. Irish kid, grew up. I remember his family was Christians. They adopted a lot of kids. They had a lot of kids that they adopted, and the family had 14 adopted stepbrothers and sisters, and Chris got thrown out and got killed. And I very well could have been with them in that car, so. But it was just there again, it was that whole lifestyle, that just Christ rescued me out of, but that, the whole, I saw everything that you could see there. I mean, every concert had its flavor. I mean, you'd be,
Yeah.
we'd walk into the front door to scalp tickets, and, "Hey man, you want to buy this? You want to buy," every kind of illicit drug you can
Yeah.
imagine, it was Portland. And even back in the 70s, and, it was going on, so,
Yeah.
that whole scene was just a bad, bad scene. And that was just one portion of my life. I mean, as a kid, I was rebellious. My dad and I didn't get along. I mean, that was part of the reason. He's like, "You best just go get a job," because, we couldn't work on the farm together. I
Yeah.
just had, rebellious teenage kid. I
Yeah.
mean, who wants that around? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like I was, horrible. But, one day my mom, I started going to church, and, the youth pastor saw me coming right away. I mean, you could see me a mile off, and, I was only coming to, church to chase a girl, and he'd never been there before. And, I was like a fish out of water. I mean, everything that was going on in that church, I just it was just grating against me. I mean, cause I was like, I knew without a doubt that I didn't belong in that setting. And, so I went to a youth group, and the youth pastor sees me right away and grabs me, and, the old proverbial sets me down and says, "Hey, Wayne, something happens to you tomorrow, you die. Where are you going?" And I'm like, "Well, going straight to hell. I mean, there's no hope for me." And he goes, "Well, you don't have to." And I'd never really, heard the gospel. I mean, I didn't understand it. My vision of, somebody that would go to heaven was like a bunch of monks in a monastery that crawled around on glass and nails and slept on a
Right.
bed of nails and beat each other with a whip and hummed all the time. I mean, that was my idea of salvation, somebody that might make it, right? That's how perverted I was. Is like I say, I didn't grow up with any Bible knowledge at all. I knew not one verse out of the Bible, and, so in a process of time, I wound up surrendering my heart and life to Christ. And it was a dynamic experience because, I was literally demon possessed as a kid, so when I prayed that prayer and asked Christ into, to forgive me of my sins, I mean, it literally was like I had hot air go out of me. And it's like for the first time in my life, I felt virtue in my heart. And I mean, I'd never felt that, ever. And it was hard to explain. I mean, I didn't even know what had happened to me, honestly. I just knew that things had changed. And about 3 weeks later, my mom set me down, and she goes, "What's going on with you?" And you got to understand, my mom was a precious lady. And I mean, she was a godly lady, even though she was tender to the Lord. She didn't know Christ, but, she was really tender to the Lord. And I'd punished this poor lady, the whole time growing up. I mean, she wanted the best for me like any mother would, but, she just was so disappointed in me. I mean, by the time, when I was 13 years old, I outran my first police officer on a dirt bike. And, I hadn't had my license 3 weeks when I was 16 years old, and I was in jail for drunken driving. So I mean, I punished my mom with things like that, all the way through. Well, she sits me down and she goes, "What's going on with you?" And I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You're different." And I go, it was probably one of the hardest things I could say at that time was like, "Well, Mom, I'm changing. going to become a Christian. It was just hard to even say it.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, you've been going to that church, in Springfield, right? And I'm like, yeah, I've been going there. And she goes, I'm going with you. And, so she went with me, and it was a old Pentecostal church, and, Jim Belmore was a pastor. And I mean, he's got a salvation message, and the next thing I look over at my mom, and she's just broken, and they give an altar call, and she's down there surrendering her heart and life to Christ, and served Christ until the day she died. So it's like that. And for me as a kid, I'm like, man, my world's changing. This is not the direction that I had envisioned, as a child, because I didn't know any different. But definitely life has changed. So, and then today, I mean, it's like, in fact, I'm excited this next weekend, Refuge Church in Klamath Falls, Pastor Jim Boyd. I do wild game banquets, and my son's actually going to join me the first time for this. He's going to do the hunting portion of it, and I'm just going to give my testimony and share the gospel. So super excited about that. That's Friday night. And then Saturday, they're having a men's breakfast, and I get to speak to the men. So it's going to be a double whammy, and so really, really excited about having just a small part in God's kingdom. So I never thought it would happen, and for me in my lifetime, being kind of a broken kid and stuff. But they'll probably make. I think I've done 17 wild game banquets now, where I've been able to share the testimony and share the gospel. So super rewarding.
And you ended up being buddies with one of those old rockers, didn't you?
Oh, Ted Nugent?
Yeah.
I haven't seen Ted for a long time. My wife actually, Rocco, his son, called me the other day, and we talked for a long time. He's wanting to fire up. They've got like Ted Nugent's kids camp deal, and he really wants to try to go big with it. So I talked to him the other day, but I haven't talked to Ted for quite a while. But Ted, like Cam and I took him hunting when he was back with the damn Yankees. They were touring, and they came to the Holt Center here in Eugene. And, of course, I got a hold of Ted through, I think he was shooting through Martin Archery at the time. I was a big Martin Archery dealer. So we had a shindig at the shop, and Ted came by, and there was not much to hunt. It was like February or something. And so there was all these feral goats on this property down south, and we took Ted hunting down there, and we killed a bunch of goats and had a great time. And Ted's, you see it now, but even back then, he was writing a book. He had a laptop. We didn't even know what a laptop was. I mean, what year was that? It would have been about 1991, I think, 91,
Right.
90 or 91. We didn't even know what a laptop was. He had one. And he's just like showing us on this laptop, and he's got his whole book on this laptop, and he's been writing, I think it was Blood Trails, the first edition. And he goes, this is going to be part of my story. And so we're in that book, but one thing about Ted, like it was like 10 years later, Cam and I were at the ATA show, and Ted was there. And, we kind of, Cam and I are kind of standing there, and Ted's talking to everybody. He's got a big line, and he turns around, and he sees Cam and I standing there, and he's like, Cam Haynes, Wayne Endicott, he never forgot you, shook our hands, give us a hug, and just sitting there talking to us. And, he used to send me all, when his kids all got married, I got wedding invitations on them, and he'd write me letters every once in a while, back in the day. And, Ted's just a real personable guy. I mean, if you really get to know him, I mean, Brian Huey's a good friend of mine, and Brian and I were just friends, and Brian met Ted kind of through, I think, going to Texas one time. He was on a hunt with Ted, and Brian and Ted got to be close. And so Brian lives down there in Texas, I think he lives just a few miles from where Ted's place is.
Right.
And of course they stay in touch, and they're close friends. But, Ted's like that guy that, he's definitely a performance guy when the camera's on, but when the camera's off, and he's the whole blood brother thing. I mean, he's your blood brother. I mean, he is really in tune. And, his wife she's just a super educated, really smart gal, has got a lot of presence on social media, a lot of, I think she's got her own podcast. I've watched, snippets of all her podcasts and stuff. I mean, she's a really sharp gal. And, when I first met Ted, him and Shemaine were newlyweds, so they were just brand new married. So, but yeah, it's been cool to watch him over the years, and how politically involved he's gotten and stuff. But yeah, he's a good man. I love him.
I love it. I don't want to forget about the hats because it's
Oh
something,
yeah.
Wayne, I've looked these things up. I can't find them anywhere. So if there's, I don't know. So because you have these like foam. I'm shifting complete direction things, but I don't want to forget. And it's one of those things I've been keeping in my head. Like, don't forget the hats. Um,
Uh-huh.
from a hunting strategy standpoint, Wayne,
Hmm.
you have like an elk and an
Oh,
antelope.
oh, you're talking about my decoy hats. I thought you were
You-
going back to Lisa's hats.
no, not Lisa's
Oh,
hats. Where's he going
yeah,
with this?
decoy hats. So Booner decoys. Now that's my friend Brian Johnson. Brian does. If you shoot Reinhardt targets, you know all the mini targets that they have.
Yeah.
So Brian does all the sculpting for Reinhardt targets. And I met Brian years ago, you know, basically because I'd been, bothering, Reinhardt for a lot of years. James McGovern is the owner of Reinhardt Targets. And I went to James years ago and I like, everybody's tired of shooting, these little tiny backyard whitetail bucks, right? So why don't you guys make a whole line of mini targets, that you can ship, UPS, and it's
Yeah.
not going to be, a Reinhardt target, an elk target is like $2,300,
Yeah.
but this is going to be affordable for your working guy. And you could do sheep, you could do mule deer, you could do bears, and it would just be a mini backyard target, but it'd be cool. It'd be like scaled down 1/3 size. And, so I bugged Brian, I bugged James McGovern, the owner. I bugged him for like 3 years. I'm like, when are you going to make that target? Well, I go to ATA one year and there's this 20 by 20 booth. And, we always had these homemade decoy hats and stuff. This guy has got all these incredible decoy hats, like better than life,
Yeah.
decoy hats. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to have these. And not only I want them, but I want to sell these in my shop.
Yeah.
And so I go up and it's this Brian Johnson, and he's got dart boards, those Reinhardt dart boards. You've seen those, right? And they're cool. They've got the
Right.
Velociraptor, they've got elk, they've got all these different dart boards now, right? So he's got those dart boards up. I mean, he's got all this crazy stuff. And I walk up and I go, Brian, or I met him, introduced myself, and I go, so I want to, he goes, oh, they're not for sale. And I'm like, well, you have a 2020 booth here at ATA. I want to sell these, and you're telling me they're not for sale. He goes, no. He goes, they're not for sale. He goes, I work for Reinhardt. He goes, I just did this for fun. I wanted to see if anybody was interested in any of this stuff, so I just displayed it. And I'm like,
Yep.
okay, that's crazy because I know what this booth costs, and you don't
Yep.
want to sell any of these. No, no, no. We're just seeing if anybody's interested in them. I go, well, I'm definitely interested in them. And so then I walk right out of his booth and I go over to James, and I'm doing some business with James McGovern. Lisa, grab one of those decoy hats. I think isn't my decoy hat somewhere around here? My buck one. I think it's back in the bedroom. But anyway, so and so James looks at me and I go, I said something about mini targets. James like, oh, he goes, my sculptor. That's him. You just came from his booth that's making the decoy hats. He goes, he's the one you got to convince to make the small targets. And I'm like, okay, I just talked to him. I go, he doesn't want to sell any of that stuff. He goes, oh, it's because I pay him to do all our sculpting. He doesn't need the money. But anyway, so James marches me over there. We reintroduce again. And Brian goes, I explain, and James is going, this is the guy that wants you to make the mini targets. And Brian goes, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. So we developed this friendship, and he's an awesome dude. He has the Anatomy Hunter on Instagram right now. He's doing all this stuff on anatomy and everything. But Brian's awesome. I was just back there and spoke at their church in Evansville, Wisconsin, and just a bunch of great people. We had a great time. Went to the Reinhardt factory. I toured the Reinhardt factory and everything. And Brian, I mean, they're all their new targets that they're sculpting. You get to see. You can't take pictures of them. And James was there, gave us a big tour, and it was just awesome. It's such an awesome bunch of people. But my relationship with the next thing I know, when I got home from that ATA show, it's not like 4 weeks later. I get like 3 giant boxes. I have antelope hats, I have deer hats, I have elk hats, I have and not just one. Like he sent me like 5 or 6 of each one for free. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, so then of course, you go to Kodiak, Alaska, that's, Bob Amin's wife, Lisa, she made us homemade deer hats years ago because I mean, Kodiak, Alaska is kind of where the deer hat decoy thing came from. And
Mm,
Lisa Amin, she made all these decoy hats. And so she made me one years and years ago because I was going with Roy Roth, who, if you know the story of Roy, is a
yeah,
good friend of Cam Haynes and I. And Roy and I were hooking up to go up there. And I had never hunted Kodiak, so she made me a deer hat. And so I had, I'd always been kind of a decoy guy, but the hat thing is, with antelope and everything, there's a lot of people that are plugged into it, and doesn't work in every situation, but those times when you're peeking up over a ridge, if you got to, and it's got to be, every time I wear it or somebody sees a picture of it, you just get hammered on, dude, that's well, I'm smart with it. I'm
yeah,
usually hunting backcountry wilderness. I'm not anywhere where I'm going to run into anybody.
yeah,
And I don't wear it all the time, but there's times when when I'm doing stock and spot and stock, I'll have it on. And I've had, there's videos, that my son has out, Return to Kodiak. You can see it in action. I mean, we've got this buck and I peek up over this buck brush. There's a bunch of low laying alder brush on a ridge, and this buck sees me and he puts his ears back and he just comes marching right towards us. And I think I missed him the first shot, and then he runs out and he stops, and I finally got the yardage. It's the first shot I was over him, and because I ranged him and he walked in about 20 more yards and I didn't judge it right. I missed him just right over his back, and then he stopped and I drill him. But the only reason he stopped is because we had those hats, and the only reason he came to us the first time is he hit. So there's a lot of times that those hats can be just incredible advantage. you know
yeah,
but but all that said, Booner decoys, Brian's kind of retired. He had revolutionary taxidermy, and he built mannequins. So I think he sold that, and they may be starting that hat business up again. But they make some of the most realistic hats that there is on the market.
I'm just your phone
If you
while
can
we're
get it,
talking.
if you can get one from him. So the Anatomy Hunter, you could go on Instagram and message him and say, "Hey Brian, I want a hat." You never know what'll
Yeah,
happen. He's
yeah,
a super awesome guy. He's got a great big heart. He's a good brother in the Lord. So I love
yeah,
him to
for sure.
death.
Those are cool. I mean,
Yeah, I think the antelope one would be
oh, it'd be
pretty
magic.
useful.
Yeah,
Wow.
So you know who Mike Elig is. He was the owner of Montana Black Gold. I sent
Okay.
one of the Booner decoy antelope hats to Mike, and I don't know how many antelope he's killed with it, but he has the most fun with it. He's uses knee pads and
Oh
elbow
yeah.
pads, and they crawl in, and you got the decoy hat on. And like
yeah,
he used to send me pictures, because in Montana, that's just an early season deal, and they have a lot of antelope, and it's an over like you
Yeah.
guys, it's an over the counter
Yeah.
hunt, for them. And Mike always had his decoy, his Booner decoy hat on, and
yeah,
his antelope, and he's like,
Yeah.
"This is too much fun."
Yeah. Too much fun.
So
oh, I think
yeah,
We'll get our hands on some. Yeah.
yeah,
We'll figure it
I
out.
put it in the phone here, so we'll
We'll
have to
figure.
get it figured
Yeah.
out because it seems like a great idea. I mean, especially if nothing else, just like you said, you're peeking over a ridge. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You want to get eyes on something.
right.
That's where I could see it applying more than anything is just visual.
You want to see a portfolio, probably somebody that's used those hats much or more than anybody I know is Frank Nosta. Now, if you don't know, Frank's a big time hunter. He's giant bow hunter. He lives in Alaska. He flies commercial airlines transport jet for FedEx. And Frank is, Frank's a super accomplished hunter. I mean, and Frank is a big decoy hat believer. And, you want to look at some pictures with decoy hats, probably his whole Instagram, you'll see those hats laying there, with his animals. So,
Yeah,
he's a big believer in that. I thought at one time, that he might, Brian thought he might purchase Booner decoy from him, but he didn't.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
liability problem with it. Of course, it's decoy hats. Everybody
Oh
just
yeah.
flips over it. But
Oh yeah.
God forbid that anybody would ever have an injury from one.
Yeah,
Somebody shoot at them. But they are
Yeah.
pretty realistic
And you
looking. There
gotta
is a
be
possibility of that you got to be
like you
smart
said,
with it.
there's gotta be smart pieces to it,
Yeah,
but there's a bunch of times you could pull it out and while you're, peeking glass and whatever.
oh yeah. I
sure.
mean, it's a great idea. So you thought of was it your baby was the 1/3 size decoys then? Was that that started with
Well,
an idea you said that?
well, Brian Johnson's the author of that.
Sure.
It was just my idea. Because I always thought, everybody's sick of shooting just some little ugly black or whitetail buck,
Yep.
Yeah.
woodland buck, backyard buck. I mean, they called them. It was the same deer all the time, and now, it's so cool because the minis, they come in a box, they can ship them. We've sold basically hundreds of them
Yeah.
and through the archery shop. But you got a little elk, you got a little bighorn sheep, you got a little mule deer, you got a
Yeah.
little bear. I mean, they've got every one.
Yep.
Now they got the Velociraptor is a mini, and that's new this year. I mean, they're just cool targets,
Yeah.
They're fun.
and so the guy that has is good backyard range, you can have all those little minis out there, and
Yeah.
he can have all of them for less than the price of one full size target,
Yep.
and Reinhardt does great with them. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, James told me, the first couple of years there, I mean, it just moved to number one and their sales just went crazy with it. I mean, they couldn't even keep up. They could hardly, do their other targets because they were so overloaded with those minis, and they still sell tons of them. So
Oh,
it's
they're
just the
great.
best start.
In the backyard, I have a little range out behind the house here, and the problem
Mhm.
here, we have a lot of elk and deer that we kind of are out in the country a little bit on the foothills
They
in
come
Colorado.
and destroy your targets.
They get destroyed. I'll come out and I'm like, why? You can't just knock it over. It's like they must have knocked it and stomped it to pieces. And
Well,
so,
and like most of them are like you talked about the big buck or whatever that's
yeah,
called, and it's a piece here and a piece here, and so
oh
you're
yeah,
always putting them back together, and eventually
yeah,
they go. But like your mini elk, he took a beating, but at least he's like the piece and
yeah.
stays
You still have
together.
your core body, but you end up with an
Yeah,
elk without a head. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So I don't know if I need to put like electric fence or something
yeah.
around the range, just you know what I mean, to keep them out of there. But they get their asses kicked out here.
Yeah, where we live, we're kind of in the mouth of the McKenzie Valley. I mean, before it goes into city, we're upriver just a little ways, but we have mountains on both sides of the valley of us here. And years and years ago, this has probably been 12, 14 years ago. Oregon, we have a tremendous lion population. I mean, we have lions
Mm.
everywhere. People put up a trail camera in their backyard, and they just always shocked. The first thing that walks by is they got a great big, mountain lion walking through their backyard. I mean, it's posted daily on social media here. I mean, everybody that has trail cam. My son, this morning, if there was some way I could show you a picture, my son sends me a picture this morning. He's got a lion this morning walking by one of his trail cams. He's like, Dad, because we had a bad storm come through this morning. It's sunny right now, and cloudy, but we got sun breaking through. But this morning we had pretty heavy storm come through, and he's like, Dad, best day ever, and I have to work. This lion just walked by my camera, and he's just like, man, I just need to give anything to go out and, try to kill this lion.
Yeah,
But, we've got just such a gross overpopulation of lions in the state of Oregon. In 1994, we lost it by less than 2% of the vote. And it went to the vote of the public to outlaw dogs for cougar.
yep,
And the sad thing is our bear and cougar population was at the highest level it had ever been in history in 94, and we lose it. But years ago, it's probably been 12 years ago, Cam Haynes had gotten a brand new Glendale buck, and he brought it out on our farm and he put it, on the archery range.
yeah,
And it'd probably been there 2 weeks. Well, we have a blueberry farm, part of our old farm. I live on part of my dad's old farm, and we live in the core of it. We have 17 acres in the middle, but we have farms all the way around us. Well, part of the farm is a blueberry farm, and they've got a fence. They got a game fence around it because, of course, you can't have deer, eating all your blueberries. So they got a game, big 14, 18-foot fence around the whole thing. And so we're a travel corridor because my farm butts up against his, up against that fence. And so everything travels through here, but right through our farm. So I go out to the archery range, and this Glendale buck is torn to pieces, right? And it's all apart. And I go up, and there was scratches on it, and there was bite marks on the throat and on the back of the neck of this, because that's hard,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
the body, and so it's that hard plastic. And I'm like, and I look at it, and of course it's in the springtime. It's not in the winter where you got muddy tracks or anything. It's all green grass. And I'm like, that's a lion did that. So I thought, man, that would have been so cool to have a trail camera on that.
yeah,
And so I put the buck all back together, and I'm just thinking, it'll never happen again, because it crossed my mind I should put a trail camera on it. But I'm like, there's, that's not going to happen. 2 weeks later, the same thing happened again. another lion passed through, and the grasses. I mean, we grow, everything here grows good. So the hay crop, and so I keep a path mowed all the way across our farm and the neighbor's farm because it's kind of one of my running paths. So I keep it mowed out. Well, the lions just walk those, so they walk from one side of the valley to the other. Well, of course, the archery range was right on the mowed path, so they come up and then boom, there it was. So twice it happened in about a month. That deer got attacked by a lion. Glendale buck.
Yep.
Big
Yep.
disappointment for that cat.
Oh yeah.
But actually, my friend, our neighbor Jake Stuckey, he just lives in Cedar Flats, which is just as a crow flies about 2.5 miles from us. He had a trail camera on his 3D target in his orchard, and his kids got on the school bus and they went off. The school bus left, and like I think it was something like 3 or 4 minutes later, he's got his trail camera in his orchard. He has a little apple orchard, and he's got his 3D target in there. This lion comes through and tackles his 3D target, and he's got a picture of it grabbing it, and then the lion standing over it after he knocked it over, and he's looking at it. So and we could get on lion stories. I could tell you lion stories for hours. I mean, I've killed a couple lions, called a couple lions in, killed them, and had lots of lion encounters, and then just all the other stories. And I do problem trapping too. So my friend Eric Lee, he has a full-time job, and we lost our government trapper, retired, got injured and retired, and then the government didn't replace him. So we have tremendous livestock loss to cougar in this area. And so Eric, basically the whole state. But Eric took upon himself. He works a full-time job, but he started responding to all the neighborhood, people with complaints. And so he built up a business. And I think in the last 10 or 12 months, he's up to like 90 cats that he's trapped, just all livestock deprivation. I mean, they come in, they kill a sheep, they kill goats, they kill horses, they kill donkeys, they kill, the lion, whatever the lion kills. I mean, he shows up, and so, I've done the same thing on a very small scale, tiny scale compared to Eric. But Eric gave me a lead last year because it was so far for him to drive some neighbors upriver, and actually caught 2 lions on one deprivation where lions came in and killed a bunch of goats and a bunch of the people's geese and ducks, and so I got both lions in one night. So it was an old female. She didn't have any teeth and no claws, and she was missing one toe. And the other one was a young Tom, and the Tom was doing all the killing, and she was just, sitting back and eating whatever he killed. So, yeah, big problem though in Oregon is cougar. We're just so overpopulated.
Yeah, I had zero idea that was the case in Oregon. Cougars were a thing, and then '94, you said they passed the no dogs, and it's like we're going
through that.
And
oh, are you?
Yeah, I think we just won.
Yeah. But
you did.
Yeah,
end of last year
they tried to just outlaw lion hunting altogether.
Oh, really?
I think it was wrapped up,
it was a whole thing.
Wrapped up in the dogs was the main.
Yeah.
But they were, throwing links in there and things that were already, outlawed. And
the bill read was something about not hunting, mountain lion and something else, and lynx, which was crazy from a political standpoint because it was already not legal to hunt a lynx, but they were adding it in there just to make it look, you know what I mean?
Right.
The heart that. But
so just kind of crazy to hear you guys went through that, and then
I mean we've been experiencing a lion explosion forever. I mean, I remember I was in Wyoming hunting, and Steve Lamb, I ran into him. He was a houndsman, and he was hunting this particular unit. We got to talking, and we were actually packing meat at night, and it was in the middle of the night. He was hiking out, and we were hiking in, going back for another load of meat. And I get to talking to Steve. He's like, "Oh yeah, we have this giant overpopulation of lions." And I'm like, and I'd hunted this unit I'd drawn it a couple times. I'd been in Wyoming in this unit a couple times. I'd never even seen a track. And, a lion, no lion kills, and and I'm like, well, how many lions do you typically kill in this area? He goes, oh, we get 3 or 4 a year. I'm like, dude, we kill like 5 or 6 within sight of city limits where I live every year. And everybody that lives in the country's got one in their backyard. And I go, you got to be kidding me. I go, you don't have a lion problem. And he looked at me like I was all out of my mind. And I'm like, no, Oregon is just overloaded with lions. I mean, the fact that we've had very little human conflict outside of livestock deprivation, it's just that, lions can be deadly. I mean, there's different. We lost a little gal up on Mount Hood, and they reenacted the whole thing. And she was hiking. She put her handbag down. She got out a pair of scissors because obviously she saw the cat, and they kind of reenacted the whole thing. And they thought that she was backing up. Well, then she dropped the scissors and took off running. And of course And at first, when they showed up, they thought it was some kind of homicide. And then the right people show up and they're like, "You got a cougar problem. This was this human conflict, and this is not a homicide. This is a cat problem." And so John Blozier, he's a pretty renowned individual in our area. When I was a kid growing up, I grew up trapping. That's one thing my dad and I shared in the wintertime when we weren't farming, was trapping. And so I grew up trapping. And I mean, my dad was the #1 state, cat trapper for, bobcat trapper for years. I mean, he would catch over 100 cats a winter. And he didn't even start that till he was in his 70s, and trapped clear up until he was in his mid 80s. So as a kid growing up, I river trapped, I've land trapped. I mean, I grew up doing fur, it was like every winter, that's what we did, is we trapped all winter. And, but John, when I remember when I was a kid, we showed up at a fur sale, and they would rent big gymnasiums or, big, town halls or whatever, wherever they could get a big space and put all these tables, and everybody would bring all their processed fur in, and fur buyers would come in and buy them. And my dad and I thought we were cutting a fat hog. We had a couple tables. Well, then John Blozier shows up, and John was probably about, I think John's 4 or 5 years older than I am. And I was just a teenage kid, so he was like graduating high school. They showed up and unloaded fur for like 15, 20 minutes, and they had like 8 or 10 tables full of fur, and they had everything. They had pine marten, they had bobcats, they had giant coyote catches. I mean, everything. And back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, fur prices were killing it. I mean, we'd make $300 for, $275 to $300 average for a bobcat. If we had 100 bobcats, that was a fair amount of money. Raccoons. I mean, I was a big coon trapper. I could easy go to high school and catch 50 coon a year. And I'd make $50 a piece for coons. And I mean, walk away from a fur sale, with $50 a piece for 50 coon, that's good money. I was cooking it when I was a kid, trapping, and this year I heard bobcat prices were up this year, but fur prices have been in the tank forever. I mean, I barely buy them. I mean, it's not even worth your gas and time to trap. But I still love trapping. The last year I trapped was I trapped in 2008, 2009, and 2010. And I lost my dad in 2020 and in 2009. Anyway, it was good because, I'd go out, I'd catch a few bobcat, and he was bedridden, and I'd bring him in, and, we'd talk about it. And he just loved trapping so much, and it was just awesome. And, I was trapping in the high Cascades, and the bobcats up there are beautiful, beautiful cats. And so it was always fun to, bring those in and sit with him and just reminisce. It was a good time. But when we lost our dog hunting and our bear baiting in 1994, like I said, we were at the highest population we've ever been in history, and we just exploded from there. And so today, if we would have never lost Measure 18 in 1994, today we would be suffering from, an overpopulation of deer and elk in the state of Oregon, which would be a good problem to have, because right now, our mule deer problem, we have a mule deer problem in that we are hurting. Most of our units are below management objective in Eastern Oregon. We only have a couple that meet management objective, and you can meet management objective if your game commission keeps dropping the management objective. So that's what we've done. I mean, from 1970 to present date, we have a very, very low management objective compared to what they were in the 70s and 80s. So, we have no comparison. In fact, I believe we're in a crisis situation in many units in Oregon. And then there's no prices for coyotes. So coyote population is just run amok. And you can't have a fawn population. You can't have any fawn survival if you don't have predator control. And that's one of our biggest problems we have in Oregon is predators. And it's always, 500-pound gorilla in the room. It's like, we can talk about, our game commission. It used to be drought. Now they call it climate change. They can blame it on all that stuff, and I've heard it for years because I'm vice president of Oregon Bow Hunters. So I do all the legislative. So I've attended our game commission meetings, and I don't so much anymore. Especially after COVID, because they quit meeting and they kind of changed things. Now they're back to meeting in the public realm. But, after COVID, I just kind of quit the meetings, and it was a lot of travel. But, for years I attended the meetings, and for years, you'd hear our biologists get up, oh, we have drought conditions, and, there's not nutrition in our mule deer, they don't have the nutrition in the mother's milk. So, we don't have good fawn survival. Well, mule deer can live in the Mojave Desert. I mean, they can live anywhere that is a worse landscape on earth, and they can thrive. And, Oregon has tremendous habitat, and we're not, I just have so much trouble believing that for 30 years I've listened to fawns dying because there's no nutrition in the mother's milk, when I have personally witnessed coyotes killing fawns in units when I was over there in the spring, either shed-horn hunting or just scouting, early season scouting, and watching groups of coyotes running mule deer and killing fawns. I have kids that come in the shop all the time that, hey, we were over, we're going to draw antelope tags. We were over looking, and, there was 4 or 5 coyotes chasing antelope. And we watched them take down 3 or 4 antelope fawns, but our southeast Oregon is a desert, so our southeastern portion of the state, which is everything from Burns east, or from Bend east, we just have sagebrush, and we have tremendous coyote populations.
Yeah.
And, we just don't have the deer. When I was a kid, there was probably 30 or 40 full-time coyote trappers that would catch over 2,000 coyotes a year. Some of them would go part-time and catch 12 to 1,500 coyotes. None of those guys are working because coyote prices, there's just no prices for coyotes. And, so coyote population's been unchecked for 15, 20 years. So we're in a crisis situation in lots of parts of Oregon for mule deer because we just don't get any fawn survival. I mean, that's just the bottom line, and I've really been working hard on trying to talk our game commission into doing, the way we do our game surveys now. And this is pathetic. They do one flyover once a year with a plane, observing from the plane.
Yeah.
So I just talked to the director of our big game, Brian Wolfer. I just had a phone conversation with him, but Debbie Colburn, she's our new director. She's new director of Oregon Fish and Wildlife. And I like her. She's not afraid of change. They're making a lot of changes in Oregon. They just did a redistricting on mule deer this year. So they changed all the hunt units this year for mule deer, and they changed the draw structure a little bit of tag structure change. But I've been talking to Brian about thermal imaging drones because have you heard of Mike, the drone guy,
No.
guy? Oh, he's on Instagram. It's fascinating because they started back east, and they would do, on farms, they would go in with these thermal imaging drones, and the technology today is crazy. Well, he started with game recovery, and Mike, the drone game recovery.
Yeah.
And so they'd go out, and he'd fly his drone. Oh yeah, well, you got a deer here, and they zoom in, and you're standing there looking at the deer. And he's like, oh yeah, you got a dead deer here. Here's your onyx pin. Go get your deer. Or we're coming back tomorrow, and we'll look at him again. Or nope, deer's barely nicked. Give it up.
Yeah.
Go back to hunting. And so, that's how he started his business. Well, then it rolled into, they started doing management where, hey, you've got this many does, in the age class and everything. Well, I talked to Mike. This has been about 2 years ago, and he said that California Fish and Game had hired him, and he took 5 of his guys down there and all their drones, and they gridded Catalina Island and gave them exact numbers of what they had for deer. And so that game management tool with thermal imaging drones is what we need to, use in Oregon, because we airball all our numbers. And I hate to put it like that, but that's what we do. There is no way that they can do a 1-day flyover, observe from the air, and a little bit on ground observance and have any kind of accurate numbers on what we have on game. But the tools are there. And so, Brian Wolfer, they're looking into it. I think it'd be a great tool for Oregon and get us on track on what we actually have, because those drones are so accurate. They could give you exact bobcat numbers, exact coyote numbers, exact every ungulate and every mammal on the landscape. They can chronicle and even give you age class on them by size. So it's
Yeah.
crazy the technology they have.
Yeah.
And so
That's nuts.
hopefully that'll be something implemented here in Oregon soon,
And
because
there's no
we
need
need
to
it.
guess it. You kind of know, exactly where you're at, and you can base management on the actual numbers rather than just a guess
Yeah.
on what's
Yeah. I mean, we've
affected.
got mandatory in Colorado. You have mandatory reporting in Colorado, don't you?
No, it's voluntary if you
Oh,
kill
it
something.
is.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we have mandatory reporting in Oregon. So we've got the harvest numbers.
Yeah.
So, that's
Yeah.
key. I mean, we need that for management. You should really lobby for that, because I mean, for game management, I mean, if they don't have exact numbers, I mean, we're penalized if we don't report within a certain period of time. You get a surcharge. You can buy a tag the next year, but you get I think it's a $25 surcharge.
Yeah, and it's not that hard. I mean, Oklahoma's that way. It's mandatory. You just have to e-tag it. You go online and
Hmm.
just say, how many points was the buck, where, what unit you shoot it in, and the date. So
Yeah.
it's not a big deal. They do with bigger, I think, a lot of the big games, so moose and some of that, you have to take it in,
Oh,
and
sure.
then they're
Yeah.
gonna egg it, all that. So,
Yeah. They
um,
tag it. Yeah.
yeah, they do it for you. So,
Hmm.
dude, I hadn't noticed we're like an hour and 26 in. Wayne, one of our
Oh
big
boy.
focuses, and I know this is gonna be this is a bit of a waste of time asking this question, because me and you had this conversation about gear, but because RuckList, one of the things we're focused on is, helping people be better educated as they go into the field, what gear they're
Hmm.
taking, and planning for a trip. And I know me and you had a phone conversation, and I think you said you take something like a 35-pound pack in for an 8-day hunt or something absurd like that. But,
Right.
wa walk us through gear from a guy that you're doing it lightweight. I mean, I hunted with you, and all your pants are cut off at the knee, so you wear like
um,
a
yeah.
capri pant in the woods. Doesn't matter what it is, a brand new pair of nice pants that get cut. But,
Yeah. I cut them off.
give us those
I
tips,
do
man.
I do run gaiters, so I do run gaiters and shorts. I mean, nobody's going to go run a marathon, well, unless you're you're Truett Haynes, and
Yeah.
you're not going to run with long pants, right?
Mhm.
But most guys are going to run in shorts. I don't hunt in long. I mean, I drink half the water, but I run gaiters, and I really like First Light gaiters.
And
They're
the
they're
reason
pretty
you cut those
comfortable.
pants off is just so you're dumping heat, so you're not drinking as
I'm
much
dumping
water.
heat. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can, and then there's no restriction. I mean, I think it's New Zealand. I think I first saw, they run gaiters and they run shorts, because they're climbing all the time. I mean, that island's just New Zealand's
yeah,
just a straight up and down mountain, so they're climbing all the time. So there's no resistance. You don't have the resistance with the long, with
mhm,
the short pants. And so I've just gotten used to it. I mean, if you look at Cameron Haynes' book, Bow Hunting Trophy Blacktail, I think he's got a picture in there standing with a llama. It's either in that book or it's Backcountry Bow Hunting. It could be in one of his two books there. And we all did that in the early days because, in the early days, I mean, we had old cotton heavy pants. We're not
right,
wearing these things in early archery season. So we just like, let's cut these things off. So we started
yeah,
cutting them off back then. But Cam standing holding the llama in the snow with,
shorts
with
and
cut
gaiters,
off. I think it was Predator pants. I think he had a pair of Predator pants on back then. But no,
yeah,
I'm a minimalist. This year I spent, I think, 21 days in the Winnehaw Wilderness with different guys. Cam was my last hunter. Cam had drawn after 24 years of putting in. It's our hardest to get elk tag. He drew. Riley Timmons and a youngster, the luck of the draw. He was up there. I hunted only one day with Riley, and then Joe Santiago. He'd drawn, and Joe was my first hunter, and all three guys killed elk, and so there was a lot of packing and everything. But lived out of that pack for 21 days. But depending on how much water I carry, it can be 31 pounds to 35 pounds is my pack. Um, I run a Mystery Ranch pack. I kind of like either the bear tooth or this year I ran a sawtooth. They're great packs. They're
mhm,
lightweight. They're really comfortable for me. They fit my torso good, and then I can adjust them. And I'm a little guy. I mean, I soaking wet right now. I weigh 147 pounds.
right,
I'm not a big guy. And so, I run an old Marmot sleeping bag. I've got a Kuiu sleeping bag. If it's cold, I take my Kuiu, but my
Mhm.
Marmot, I've got a Pinnacle and a Hydrogen. I've got both bags. They're both down, and they will literally stuff this big. And I've got a compression, bag I put them in. I usually run an X-Pad, uh, air mat. I have a bad back, so X-Pad is a regular air mattress, but they're fairly lightweight, and I run that. I don't do a jet boil. A lot of guys do a jet boil. I've got a little pot, and I've got a little Optimus burner, and I take
Yep.
a bottle, and I've got a little titanium. It's got a cup and a little pot, and it all goes in there. My Optimus stove, everything, and I even put my tea and my lighter. Everything goes in that. So that's what I run for cooking. Of course, I make my own. Have you heard of Ezekiel cereal?
No.
So Ezekiel cereal it's a sprouted. It's like grape nuts, and you would like taste and everything would remind you of grape nuts, but it's all sprouted. And I'll take Ezekiel cereal, peanut butter, I'll soak raisins, and I make my own trail food out of it. And I mix the peanut butter, and then I use chocolate protein powder, and I mix
Mhm.
it all up, and I make like a soft baked cookie, and I'll make bags of those. And sometimes I'll throw a little Mountain Ops Enduro in it, to
Mhm.
give it a little flavor. And I make soft baked cookies out of those, and that's pretty much breakfast. And then of course I take jerky, and I've liked several different varieties of freeze dried food, but
Right.
there's some favorites there. But I try to make sure my food is good, but my food is my biggest pack. So I've got
Yeah.
nuts too, and I take almonds and I take raisins and stuff. But I'm pretty minimal on my nutrition, but it's good nutrition. And I'm not really there to eat. I'm there to fuel it when I need it.
Right.
But probably that makes up the bulk of and then of course merino wool. I always take. I don't care what the season is. I've got merino wool leggings. I don't take a top, but I've always got my leggings. And then I don't care what it is either. I've been in some bad situations in Wyoming where we had 30, 40 mile an hour winds and it was 15 degrees. So I've always got headgear. I take headgear, and I've got one of those old wool caps that got the eye holes in the nose and everything, and it's wool. I take that with me regardless, because, and then, I've always got a good pair of QU's, got some good insulated gloves that are packable gloves. I've always got those. And then, of course, meat sacks. I've always got good. It's funny this year. Cam killed his bull and didn't have any meat sacks, but I had meat sacks. I've always got you covered. And a garbage bag, I've got a good garbage bag. So when we're transporting meat, I'm not getting my pack all bloody.
Yep.
I usually, I've got a two headlamps. I've usually got one that's, plug-in chargeable type. And then I've got one that takes batteries. So I've got two. So I'm always got, a good light. Um, and then my toiletries are simple, it's just good baby wipes. I've got athletic tape, and I've got Band-Aids, and usually, Neosporin or something like that. But that's pretty much, rounds out the first aid.
Yeah.
So all together, like I say, I'm pretty much a minimalist. And then my tent, I had a friend give me a really fancy 2-man Big Agnes, and it weighs less than a pound and a half. But I've
Yeah.
got a Kuiu tent too, and I really like that Kuiu tent. It's a little bigger, it's a little heavier, and I run both of them. But that Big Agnes 2-man, that's a sweet
Does it
little
use
tent.
the Big Magnus, does it use your trekking poles as the poles?
I
Or has it
don't.
got its own?
It's got its
Yeah.
own poles, but it
Okay.
doesn't. It's like super lightweight. It's like with poles and the little lightweight stakes and everything. It's like a pound and a half. And then I
Yeah.
Oh,
split it up. So I put the stakes on the side. I don't put them in the tent. So I put them on the side, and then I stuff the tent in its own little sack in the bottom and stuff.
Yeah.
And then, I've got an old man cushion, kind of a little piece of foam that I take, and I use that. I wrap my coat up in it, and
Yep.
I always take a coat, and I still like, and I'm kind of a Kuiu guy. And I've got some Sitka that's good too, but Kuyu's got like this lightweight polar fleece jacket. And it's polar fleece on the outside, so it's soft and quiet and everything. And I like those jackets for early season. for late season, I've got a whole different program. I mean, I've got a 10-pound Arctic oven tent. And if you're not familiar with Arctic oven tents, everybody in Alaska is, because they don't
Okay.
condensate. And I've got a little 2-man Arctic oven that I run in the late season, for late blacktail. So that's a whole different program. That
Right.
pack in the late season is a lot heavier.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
like
that
I
makes
said, I'm kind of a minimalist. So, all that I can go for 10 days. I can pack enough food for 10 days, and I'm pretty comfortable. And,
yeah.
I don't do bivy sacks. I've tried laying out before. I got bit twice by spiders when I was just younger, when I was a kid, when I was like, heck, I'm just going to sleep in a sleeping bag, and got bit
Yep.
once on the side of the face and got bit once on the leg and once in the corner of the mouth. And I was like, there's no more laying out.
No.
Spiders like me. They come find me at night. So I'm always a
Yep.
tent guy.
Yep.
So yeah, but
Yep.
that's pretty much the program. And, I'm comfortable. A guy could shoot good with, a 31-pound pack on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not inhibiting, so if you get stuck in a situation where, you can't drop your pack and, you need to take a shot, you can make a good shot with that pack on.
Yeah. And so, I mean, most of your clothes, you're not carrying a lot of extra clothing gear. You've got what you got on your body, a down layer, probably up top.
Yeah,
Up,
you're usually shedding the coat, yeah, and I've got, just a camo, and I like long sleeve camo t-shirt,
yep.
because of course your arms get scratched up if you're a backcountry hunter. You're not on trails. A lot of times you're cross country and you take you hook a stop, you hit the ground. Long sleeves, you're
Yep.
not going to get scratched up as bad. And like I say, I do wear gaiters, and so there's just more airflow with the pants. But yeah, I've spent 10 days, 12 days, 13. One time I was after a bull and I spent 13 days. I ran out of food and I had to give up on him. And his cows, it wasn't that he was brilliant, his cows were brilliant. And his cows kept him alive. And just every day I was on him for most of the day till daylight, till dark. He's bugling all the time, but his cows were just totally brilliant. I mean, the more time I spent with him, the better they knew me, the more that they could evade me. And I ran out of food and I was so far back in, it took me almost a day to get out of there with no food. That was a lot of years ago. I called that bull 9 lives because it was just like, there was just no way that I was going to get arrow in him. And
Yeah.
the following year I went back in and actually Wyatt Seabright killed the bull that I was after 2 years after. But this 6-point stepped out. There was the same area and 6-point stepped out and I shot him. And of course, the bull I was after, where I was after 9 lives a year before, steps right up and stands there, and I video him and take pictures of him. So when Wyatt killed it 2 years later, I got a few pictures of that bull because he was pretty
Yeah.
unique. He was split on his G4 and his G5. He had splits on both sides, So he was a pretty unique bull. He just had gotten a lot bigger. Even when I was
Yep.
pursuing him, he was pretty good. He was probably around 345, 350 when I was pursuing him, and when Wyatt killed him, I mean, he was big, old, heavy, giant bull. So
Yeah.
good
Yep.
times.
How about footwear? What are you putting on your feet? Because you do a lot of running. You and Tyrel are similar. Tyrel does a lot of long
Some
distance kind of
running, yeah.
backcountry stuff, and
Yeah.
I think you
I
do a
love
lot
to
of that
run.
too.
I still run. I'm not doing the distance I used to, but I run hills. I try to run Pisgah, or we got hills right here in Thurston, and I like running hills. And of course, Cam wrote the book on that. If Cam's a runner, I'm barely a runner if you compare me to Cam, because he's doing
Yeah.
tons of miles. But
Mm.
it just keeps me in shape year round, because when you get old, it's easier to stay in shape year round than try to get in shape for hunting. So it's
Right.
and the quality of life is better and everything. But what I wear for boots, I used to do Loas. I loved Loas, but I could wear them out. I wouldn't even get through a season with them, and I'd wear them out. And years ago, this guy came by and he's like, this has been probably 15, 16 years ago. And he had these boots and they were called Crispies, and he wanted me to be a dealer. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I'll give you a pair of these boots. And I'm like, when they give you, I hate that with reps, because they want to give you everything. And it's just a license to call you every week. Do you want me to call you next week? No, I don't want, if I don't. And so I told the rep, I go, well, you can make me a deal on them, but I'm going to buy them. He goes, no, I'm going to give them to you. And I go, no, you're not going to give them to me. I go, I want to buy them. And, because if I don't like them, I don't want you calling me, and I'm going to be straight with you whether I like them or not. Well, the Idahos were their model that they had even clear back then. They still got the Idahos in their line. And so I looked them all over, and they were synthetic. They were lightweight. And so I ordered a pair, and I absolutely loved them. And so I've probably worn out 7, 8 pairs of Idahos, maybe 9. And
Right.
I pretty much wear them all the time, even in the shop when I'm working. But they're a great boot.
Anything
I
with
mean,
like a
Crispy
sheep
makes a
feet
lot of
marking?
different models, and there's a lot of great boots that they make. But I still love the Idaho's the best for my application. I've had them in Alaska. I've done every kind of hunting there is in them, and they're you can run in them. They've got they got a easy flex in them, but they got good corners, so they're really steep country. They got good edges, so you can side hill all day and your feet feel good.
Yeah.
But I love those for boots. So I run Crispies and I get good
Yeah.
life out of them. I'll get 3 years out of a set of Crispies, and I'm like I say, I'm in them almost every day.
Yeah. What, I on the insoles, do you do anything with like a sheep feet or anything special on the insoles? Just
I
foot right in
don't,
the
I don't.
yep.
I just run their insoles. I've tried insoles before, and I guess I'm not that picky on them. I've had guys that say, "Oh, you got to run these insoles." I just like, well, whatever it comes stock with, I'm good. I just like, just let me wear them. I'm good.
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of the same for me, probably because smaller people. You'd
Yeah.
probably compress a shoe
I
a
think
little
it makes a
different than.
difference. I mean, I go through boots a
But
week,
yeah,
sure.
I've never, the military was a big thing. Go get the insoles; it'll help a bunch. And it's like, just whatever's in there is perfect. The other
Right,
stuff's
right.
start feeling weird. You know,
Yeah.
Well,
I
that's
think
that's definitely true. I mean, like I said, I used to when I was younger, I weighed 180, 182, 180. I went for a few years I weighed 187, and maybe I've just ran it all off. But anymore I have to eat a lot, and I have to really make sure I've changed my diet years ago, but I eat quite a bit. I'm a big eater, and like I said, I think I'm tipped the scales this morning at 147. And yeah, it's just I'm just a little guy, but a bigger guy could definitely need more support with feet because, of course, a lot of weight there. And and
yeah.
I wear 11s, and Brian, do you wear 13s or 14s or
14. Yeah, 14s.
14s?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, my son's 6'4", and he wears size 13 and a half, size
Yeah.
14. So he got big feet, but I think I don't know what my son's. He's probably weighing what I weighed when I was younger. He's probably weighing in 175, 180. But he definitely has more needs with his boots, and he wears a lot of different boots too. Than
Yeah,
what I
he
wear because I think he just definitely has more needs with his feet than I do.
yeah. Yeah, I bought a pair that he let me try on his boots in camp actually, those Amberlins with the boas, and I ended up
Oh
buying that
yeah.
pair because they're just for me, they felt like a tennis shoe. I mean, they're not light like a tennis shoe, but just the way it fits you,
Hmm.
it's a very for me, as an athletic fit. It felt really
Right.
good, and I've worn through those, but, I mean, they were good boots, so,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
absolutely been important for me is, they need to feel, boots that work good for me like the Idahos, they feel like a running shoe because I can run in them. And they don't
Yeah.
feel terrible. They don't feel like a clubby boot. You put on a set of boots and they'll either feel fast or they'll feel really
Mhm,
slow.
mhm.
And so, usually if they feel fast, they're gonna kick you in the woods pretty good.
Yeah,
So and that's always what I look for is a pair of boots you try them on, they feel fast.
absolutely. Man, Wayne, thank you for all the time and energy. I didn't even
Oh,
get
sure.
into I said this a lot on the podcast, like, we'll have to have you on again, but, I would love to sometime. I know I wanted to talk to you about Alaska stories and all the stuff you've done because 'cause you've been on some crazy hunts, and we didn't even get to touch on it, and so, I'd
Yeah,
like to bug
yeah,
you in if we can and hear some of those fun stories and just learn from you, but,
sure.
we got a great conversation, it just flew by, and so,
Oh, yeah.
thank you for being on, we appreciate you, man, and keep doing what you're doing. It's fun to watch what you're up to and learn from you a little bit. And we're taking a road trip this summer up to your part of the country, so I'm gonna
Oh,
probably bug you
awesome.
and stop
Oh,
in. And
awesome. Look forward to it. So yeah, we have here on the farm, we have accommodations, so you're welcome. I mean, we got a guest barn
yeah,
and, so just let me know when you're
yeah,
coming
I
and we got a
will.
place for you to stay. It'd be
Yeah, we'll
awesome.
come
I
partner.
appreciate you inviting me as an daughter, so yeah, it was
Yeah.
great hunting with you that time. And, I
Yep.
look forward to seeing you this summer. It'll be great.
Yep. Yep. I wanted to ask about what was your buddy's name that came from working with you? He's a he
Oh,
does
Kevin
farm.
Akers. Yeah,
Yeah.
Brian, his
Yeah.
name's Kevin Akers. Yeah,
Yeah.
Kevin lives
Kevin.
up north, and he's a lineman. Kevin's a great elk hunter. You know, he was really sick on that trip. You know, we don't know what he caught, but I mean, he was in the tent for like 4 or 5 days and he wasn't feeling well. And he crawls out of the tent and he goes driving around and he had a bull bugling right off the road and he turns his truck off and listens to him and he got closer. He gets out and he walks over the edge and the bull was standing right there. I think, you know, that bull is like north of 330, you know, so it was a good bull and he shoots it right there.
I couldn't believe it. I
awesome.
got pictures from him and it's like, yeah, I'd hunted my ass off for 6 days, get nothing.
Yeah.
Kevin's throwing up in his tent. I had to leave and he was still sick. I kind of like knocked on the tent door. I was like, please don't, I don't want to get anywhere near you. And, and then I get a picture 2 days later. I'm in hunt camp in Colorado. And yeah, Kevin went out his first morning and shot a bull. And I'm like, that's classic. I mean, when he's good, you know? And so lessons we learned on that hunt for me.
Yeah.
But
Kevin's a great elk hunter. I mean, it wasn't, you know, I mean, he is, and he's a fantastic caller. I mean, the guy's just, he's just a wizard with calls. I mean, he knows how to call elk in. He's a good elk hunter.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Wayne, thanks again. Tell Lisa thank you for the time as well for borrowing your afternoon from you. And yeah, we'll get you on again if you don't mind and get into some of those stories. Okay.
All right, you bet. Much. Lord bless. Right. Good hunting.
Hey, thank you. Same
Take
to you,
care.
buddy.
You bet. Bye.
Ooh, lolly,